This video is for veterans looking for a job with the federal government after the military. Veteran hiring is broken down into three key parts. There's veterans preference, veteran status, and non-competitive hiring. Continue watching as I explain each one. Before we get started, you could help out by liking this video to help with the YouTube algorithm. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of all the new videos that are uploaded, and share with anyone that could use this information. I'm going to start with explaining veterans preference. To show you the policy, I'm at opm.gov, then I went to the policy tab, veteran services tab, and vet guide for HR professionals tab. This is the exact place that an HR specialist is going to go to confirm that you meet veterans preference. I'm also only going to focus on three preferences. They're the main ones and most common. You have TP, CP, and CPS. This section of OPM is going to show you what it takes to meet the qualifications or the eligibility for each of these preferences and how they're ranked against each other when it comes time to use them. Before I get started, I want to explain that veterans preference is only applicable to announcements that are open to the public, where the hiring path is all U.S. citizens. The reason for this is that veterans only get preference over non-veterans and only when announcements are open to the public. The one exception to this is the direct hire authority. The direct hire authority allows us to post to the public without using veterans preference because the position has either been deemed hard to fill or hard to retain. When announcements are open to the public and veterans preference is used, veterans are also ranked against each other based on their preference category that we're going to explain in a second. So TP is the lowest level, CP is the middle, CPS is the highest level. So they're ranked in that way, where CPS gets referred first, CP, then TP. If you need help with the entire hiring process from start to finish, check out our book, Federal Hiring Advice, Your Guide to Government Jobs, available on Amazon. The link to purchase is in the description below. Here you can see I have the eligibilities pulled up for TP, which only provides you 5-point preference. The way the points are used is only towards your rating score. So when you take a questionnaire, when you apply for the position, there are a lot of questions that ask you to rate yourself between having no experience but then being an expert and everything in between. Those are called rating questions. You get a score for answering those, and when you have a 5-point veterans preference with TP, that adds 5 points to that score. So if the score is being used to differentiate people between best qualified, well qualified, minimally qualified, it's going to give you 5 extra points towards that. The same thing with CP and CPS being a 10-point preference, it adds 10 points to that score. You can see here the TP 5-point preference eligibilities. So you just have to meet one of these since it's or in every category. To be qualified for TP, you would either need to have been in the military during a war, during the period of April 28th, 1952 through July 1st, 1955, or have 180 consecutive days other than for training, any of which occurred after January 31st, 1955 and before October 15th, 1976, or been during these dates of the Gulf War, August 2nd of 90 through January of 92, or 180 days consecutive other than training between beginning September 11, 2001 and ending August 31st of 2010, or in a campaign or expedition where you received a campaign medal. On the two that show that it's 180 days consecutive where any part of it could have occurred within these date ranges, that means that even if one day were in that date range, you would be eligible. Scrolling down, we get to the CP and CPS, which are both 10-point disability preferences. For CP and CPS, it means that you have a service-connected disability rating. The TP, the 5-point, means that you do not have a disability rating. You're not required to. Having a disability rating of at least 10% but less than 30% is what qualifies you for CP. CPS is when you have a service-connected disability rating that is over 30% or 30% or more. But now that we've covered TP, CP, and CPS, there are other veteran categories that you could look into, such as XP, which is derived preference. It means that you're basically trying to use someone else's preference in your benefit. But there's also a possibility to be a veteran without preference. So if you're a veteran, you do not have a disability rating, and you did not meet any of the criteria under TP preference, then you would be what's considered a veteran without preference, and so you would actually not get any preference over a non-veteran or a U.S. citizen. Now that we've covered veterans preference, now we're going to talk about veteran status. So status comes with some special hiring authorities just for veterans. The main ones are VRA, being 30% or more disabled, and VEOA. To look at the eligibilities for each of these, all I did was scroll down a little bit farther under the same section of OPM that we covered before. So this first section, VRA, what VRA allows you to do is have status on announcements that are not open to the public, but that they would be open to what we call status candidates. These are the announcements that have all the hiring authorities. They'll be open for facility employees, agency employees, other federal employees, reinstatement eligibles, VRA, VEOA, Schedule A, every authority that you can imagine. There'll be announcements just for that. That's what's going to give you your veteran status, gives you the ability to apply and be considered under those areas of consideration, where somebody like a non-veteran that has no other status, they would not be eligible to be considered under those. So having VRA eligibility just requires that you meet these criteria. So any disabled veteran, so any service-connected rating allows you to be VRA eligible. If you don't have a service-connected disability, serving during a war campaign where you have a badge, that qualifies you. Also, veterans that served under active duty under another operation that you also have a medal or an award, or if you're recently separated. So that's usually in the last 3 years if you've been recently separated. It's interesting that there are some cases where you can have status but not preference, and VRA would be one of those. It would be a recently separated veteran that doesn't have a service-connected disability, or also was not in during any of the time frames for TP preference. You could be a veteran without preference, but be eligible for VRA hiring authority. Scrolling down a little bit farther is the 30% or more disabled veteran authority or status. This is just anybody that's retired from active duty with a disability rating of 30% or more, or been rated by the VA at service connected at 30% or more. For that, you would have a disability letter from the VA. The way the 30% authority or status is different than the VRA is the way the appointment works. VRA has a limit of GS11, 30% or more, they do not have a limit. Also, the appointments are different. So under VRA, we mentioned that they have to go on a 2-year probation and then convert to permanent, and they're on an accepted appointment during that time. The way the 30% or more disabled veteran authority works is that you're hired under a term position. So a 1 year, it says at least 60 days, generally would put you out for a 1 year. That way you get all your benefits, but then you can be converted to permanent at any time. And under your term appointment, you're still in the competitive service. There's a subtle differences between the competitive and accepted service, but it's better to be in the competitive service, so that's a plus. And scrolling down to VEOA, VEOA is actually a permanent hiring authority, and all you need to be eligible is to be either preference eligible, so that means that you meet either the TP, CP, CPS preference criteria, or be a veteran who's separated with 3 or more years of continuous service. When you apply to an announcement, you may actually qualify for one, two, or all three of these statuses. And that's going to place you on a certificate with that authority so that when it's reviewed, interviewed, and you're selected, that's what you'll be placed under. HR's goal is to give applicants the most advantageous rating that they can, or put them on the appropriate, most advantageous appointment. So VEOA is the most advantageous because it is a permanent appointment from the start, where VRA puts you on a 2-year probation, and the 30% or more disabled puts you on a term appointment that you need to be converted from later. Some people try to use VEOA as internal applicants when they're applying to external positions. VEOA does enforce time and grade if you use it that way, where a VRA and 30% disability statuses do not. They actually allow you to bypass time and grade when you're applying as an external candidate. Now that we've covered veterans preference and veteran status, there is the potential to use certain veteran statuses to be considered non-competitively for jobs, which means that you can be hired for a position using your veteran status outside of a job announcement. The two statuses are VRA and the 30% or more hiring authority. So under VRA, we talked about how the cap is the GS-11. 30% or more does not have a cap, so you could be non-competitively hired for any grade. The way you would use this status is to either see a job online on USA Jobs and then contact the facility and request to be considered non-competitively. You could also go to the facility directly and just ask if there are any positions that are available that you qualify for, and then they can forward your application to the hiring manager. The thing with non-competitive hiring eligibility is that the hiring manager doesn't have to select you. HR just has to forward your application to them. That's the definition of consideration. If the position is hard to fill or hard to retain, or there's a lot of vacancies, or there's high turnover, that's when a hiring manager is most likely to use a non-competitive hiring authority. Another way that I see it used pretty often is for internal candidates that are hired for other positions within the facility. So if there's a position within the facility or even in the same department, the hiring manager may have already worked with this candidate, understands that they have non-competitive hiring eligibility, so they will likely select them because they're familiar with them. If you're on the outside and you're coming in, there will be a little bit of apprehension because they don't know your work ethic. One thing that the non-competitive hiring eligibilities afford people that are already in the federal government is the ability to skip time and grade. So when you're a federal employee, if you don't have any of these eligibilities and you're just applying as an internal candidate, you have to meet time and grade requirements, which requires you to be in the position at the next lower grade for 52 weeks before you can promote. Having VRA or being 30% or more service-connected disabled allows you to bypass time and grade if you're considered non-competitively or if you're applying to an external announcement. That doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be considered for the position. You still have to meet the specialized experience, and that means that you're going to have external specialized experience, because if you're skipping time and grade, your specialized experience will not be at the next lower grade if you're trying to use your federal experience. So you would need to have external experience to qualify, or education. So sometimes, you're getting your foot in the door, you take a low-level position, but you really maybe have a master's degree. A master's degree in a related field would qualify you at the GS-9 for a lot of positions. So having VRA eligibility or being 30% or more disabled would allow you to use that master's degree to be considered for GS-9 positions. Just to summarize, we were talking about veteran hiring. So under veteran hiring, you have veterans preference, veteran status, and non-competitive hiring eligibility for certain statuses like VRA and being 30% or more disabled. So under preference, you only get preference over non-veterans, and then veterans are ranked by their status, their category, whether CPS is the highest rank, then it goes CP and TP. CPS is 30% or more disabled, CP is between 10 and 30, and TP would be no disability rating. Then you have status, which is VEOA, which is a permanent appointment for veterans. You have VRA, which is a accepted service appointment with a 2-year probation. Then you also have the 30% or more disabled status, which gets you a term appointment at first and then converted to permanent later. Then being VRA and 30% or more disabled allows you to be non-competitively eligible. This allows you to request consideration for announcements that you see on USA Jobs as a non-competitive candidate, or also allows you to contact the facility and see what's available and be considered for any of those. But non-competitive eligibility is at the mercy of the hiring manager. They can look at your resume, but they in no way are obligated to select you. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. If you need to work one-on-one, you can visit the website at www.federalhiringadvice.com and we can schedule a time to meet.